The role of the rule of law in our national development is a very important subject. So, if the rule of law had prevailed, there would have been no crisis on June 12th. MKO would have been president. And perhaps all of his promise about farewell to poverty would have happened, right? Can you already see the connection? Rule of law, national development. That's my topic. So, I'm just going to adopt a simple definition which says that all people and all institutions within a political body are subject to the same laws. It simply means no one is above the law. All of us are equal, or we are to be treated equally. Even government is not above the law. That's what it means. But is this really the case? Really? Okay, so let's quickly go. So, and that's why I say, well, you say no, and that's maybe, and maybe not. I think we must accept some of the privileges that some enjoy, perhaps as a result of the work that they do. The speaker before me, Professor Jega, has alluded to the removal of the immunity clause. Well, really and truly, I have no new position on the matter, but they come with consequences. So, because of the work some people do, they are sometimes not immediately subject to the consequences of what they have done. And I want us to see the rule of law in terms of law and order. That's really the perspective that I want to share. So those privileges may confer some preferential treatment, and they may suggest that some people are more powerful than others, but I take the view that those privileges do not place them above the law. So I cite one example. There's a country whose former head of government, and I'm not going to name the country, you can find it yourself. So he committed some offenses while he was a politically exposed person lower on in his political career. He was later to rise to national leadership, and at that time they couldn't touch him. When he left office, of course, the prosecution started, he was convicted. Then the problem arose. Which prison were they going to send him to? Because they then realized that he had state secrets in his head, so they couldn't keep him with common criminals. And so they had to build him a special prison, wing of a prison in their existing prison. Are we still equal before the law? The law has ultimately caught up with him. It couldn't initially. But even after they caught up with him, they still realized that this man can't be kept with common criminals. He must serve prison in a special cell. So I move on again to what I want to do now is to animate the concept, not as an idealistic concept, but a real life issue. So the rule of law is so important because it is what separates us from animals. That's why we are equal. That's why Governor Soludo cannot come now and seize my car because he's now governor. But you know, in the animal world, he can. Because there, might is right. And you know who gave us the rule of law? The Romans. And the ancient Roman Empire at its splendor was built on the rule of law. But the empire began to crumble. And why did it crumble? Simply because they began to turn their backs on their greatest gift to the human civilization. And if you want to pursue that further, go and read about Emperor Caligula. But the rule of law is not some fancy concept. It's not a legislative thing or a lawyer thing. It is about lives, it's about livelihoods, and it's about the quality of life. So it's a great determinant whether a country or a state or a local government is safe or unsafe. And that will determine whether it is a place to start a family, that will determine whether it is a place to work, or whether it's a place to start a business. One of the indicators of poverty or prosperity is the rule of law, because it also impacts on the decision whether to invest or whether to divest. The dominion of law helps wealth managers and managers of capital to decide where to move capital. So it's not just a government thing, it's an all of us thing. Can we say that? It's an all of us thing. So, how government responds to her responsibility regarding the security of lives and property is one part of the spectrum of that all of us thing. The other part of the spectrum is our own conduct as citizens. So let us connect a few dots between the rule of law, the cost of living, and the cost of doing business in our land. How many of us have experienced state and non-state actors standing along transport corridors and collecting essentially undocumented and unaccountable tolls? Are we familiar? But you know what happens? All of those costs that trader BRF pays in order to get his goods to market will ultimately be passed to Professor Jega and to Dr. Amina and to Mrs. Oyemade and to all of us. But once there is that failure on the road, you collect illegal tolls, it affects cost of living. That's one dot. I will move very quickly because time is not our friend. Lawlessness and lawfulness, aspects of the rule of law, they have cost consequences. If you do a Google search today about the cost of producing oil, crude oil, you will see that it varies in some parts from as low as $12 per barrel and goes as high as $40 per barrel. Now, what does that mean? Some of the impacts of high costs is vandalism of oil assets, pipelines. So in that environment where the rule of law is not prevalent, production costs will certainly go up. Now, a barrel of crude oil probably trading at $60 per barrel today. So if you are in pipeline vandalism era, net profit will be just $20. But if you are in an arena where there is no pipeline vandalism, there are no challenges, production cost is $12. Net profit is $48. You see the difference? Again, these are real life issues, and they are issues that concern you and they concern me. But beyond net profit is gross national income. Add that to total amount producible. Because once the pipelines are damaged, not only does it increase the cost of production, it reduces how much you can push out. So volume is affected. Another part of that spectrum is that where there is the absence of law and order, it repels human capital. People seek safety. Our first speaker has told us about the need to bring home some of our best minds and best brains. But they will come without any invitation. The more compliant we are with our own rules, the more safe they feel, the more predictable our environment becomes. Road traffic behavior. You say as a barometer for gauging the preeminence of rule of law is yet another area to think about. So, how many big men are here who are operating unregistered vehicles? It sends a very bad message. It is a breach of the road traffic law. Every vehicle must be registered. Every vehicle, irrespective of who is driving it. It just sends a message of predictability that this is a lawful environment. I see a lot of big men who drive unregistered vehicles. They should be arrested and prosecuted. Then, using the wrong vehicles, I see some vehicles now on some roads that in some other jurisdictions you will not put animals in them. I will leave the matter there. But they have consequences for national development. And I see us also using the wrong vehicles for doing certain things. And therefore, we crowd out the space for investment and for development. So where there should be a truck, we now put the thing on a car. You have taken somebody's business away in an unauthorized way. So these are specters of the rule of law and order that I want to share, just to connect them that they are real life things. And the more lawful we become, the more compliant we become, the more expansive and successful we will be as a people. I have no doubt in my mind. Now, just one quick point on how law and order on road traffic impacts development. It costs lives. People die in avoidable and preventable road traffic accidents. So, in my previous parish, up until 2013, I had responsibility for federal roads, and we used to get these reports from FRSC about road traffic crashes. Incidentally, the FRSC was under the office of the Secretary to Government. But what was interesting was that I noticed that from some of those reports, especially in the month of September and October of 2022, no less than 400 people were dying on our federal roads every month. That does not include the report of the ones on the state roads. Now, if you just multiply that, 4,800 lives in a year, that's too much human capacity and human capital for any nation that wants to develop to lose. It's just too much. But this is about law and order. That's a lot of manpower that is inimical to national development. Of course, let me go quickly to the improper use of road transport infrastructure. How many of us trade by the roadside? How many of us park unlawfully on the road? All of these things inhibit free flow of traffic. What does that cause? It causes gridlock. When it causes gridlock, many things happen. The economy is not efficient. It affects our personal well-being. I lost a friend in traffic to a heart attack. Then the emissions and impact on national productivity is just something you don't want to compute. And then, of course, let us look at how we build. How many of us build and rent a skip in which we keep all the waste and bring in all the materials? Or we just dump the materials by the side of the road and it goes into the drain, and after we've built, we go away. And then a few months later, there is flooding. Did we contribute to it? How many of us are mining, and mining without the appropriate protocol, and the damage we are causing to the environment and the impact on national development? How many of us are members of unions and associations, and how many strikes have we convened that should never have been convened? How many strikes did we convene without giving the appropriate notice? These are issues of rule of law. There's nothing unlawful about a strike if it is done properly. But these are real lives and livelihoods and impact of compliance with law and how they affect national development. Of course, I quickly go to justice. How much does it cost to get justice, and how long does it take? And what is the efficacy of arbitration? Is arbitration award also subject to another court overview? Once we have this kind of environment, we are telling investors, don't come. And when we tell investors, don't come, we are inhibiting national development. There are red flags. But in terms of access to justice, let me just tell you a quick story before I close. And it's a story worthy of mention. It's a case that happened in 1982. It was concluded in 1986. That's something instructive about it. A case went from the High Court in Nigeria right through to the Supreme Court, and in 5 years it was finished. It's a case by one lady called Margaret Chinwe Stitch. She sued the Attorney General of the Federation. What was it all about? She had imported a used car from Germany. She was Nigerian, she'd married a German, they were coming home, so she brought in a Mercedes-Benz 280. And the rules at that time, under the Federal Ministry of Finance with their act, was that you could bring in those cars. When you bring them in, come and get an import license. She complied, brought her car in, and then she was supposed to pay duty of 33%, which was 1,445 naira. For those of you who are not born then, that was a lot of money. Fast forward, they didn't give her the import license, they delayed, and they did all sorts of things. Well, she eventually paid the 33%, and later they now issued her a new estimate and said, well, the new duty now was 500%, and she was now supposed to pay 14,500. Of course, she would have none of it. They issued her a receipt saying she had only made part payment. She went to court. She lost in the High Court. They didn't give her a vehicle, of course. She lost in the High Court, lost in the Court of Appeal. But when she got to the Supreme Court of Nigeria, they found out that the customs had sold the car to Ogun State government. Ogun State government had in turn sold the car to another third party. But the Supreme Court said, don't worry, we're going to get to the root of this. Even though it's a final court, we're going to join the Attorney General of Ogun, and we're going to join that third party. Go and bring them before us. That was in this country in 1986. So when the final buyer came, he said, well, that, things have changed. He has started selling the car as parts. Supreme Court said, okay, no problem. Chief Registrar, go and inspect the car and come and file a return before us of what you see. The Chief Registrar then was a man called Mr. Toyin Keshiro. So he came, he went and filed a report, and they saw that the car had been balkanized. But fast forward, Supreme Court gave judgment in her favor. And this is the heart of the matter. They said that if the government of her country, and this is about the government not being above the law, that if the government of her country had issued policy statements and made laws, she had a legitimate expectation in believing that they will keep their word. And that's the relevance of this case. Legitimate expectation. And this is what the rule of law does. That people will act in the way that they have said they will. Whether government, whether individuals. Anyway, they then sent the case back to trial for the taking of evidence, because the car was no longer what it was. So they said you should go and take evidence of the cost of replacing the car so that she could get an efficacious remedy. I move on and I ask those who vandalize electricity infrastructure like transformers, towers and cables, and those who vandalize telecoms and fiber equipment, whether they are mindful of the adverse impact of their conduct on our collective national development. Do you know how many young people are getting on and getting by using their phones to do business, to sell their merchandise, to communicate with their customers and their clients? They are the backbone of small businesses in this economy and in every economy. So every time you go and cut fiber cable, every time you go and disconnect electricity, you are killing small businesses in this country. Just understand it. So, and I ask those who improperly dispose of their refuse, who pollute our water bodies, whether they connect these dots to the outbreak of disease, to epidemics, and to deaths, and how many people they unconsciously cost Nigeria in terms of human capital. Have we connected the rule of law to the prevalence of preventable and avoidable diseases like polio, cholera, and measles in our part of the world? Have we? And have we considered what the prospects for overcoming these diseases can be if we just react more positively to sanitation laws and sanitation regulations? Clearly, there is no debate. Rule of law impacts national development, without a doubt. The more of it you have, the more prosperity we see, and vice versa. Ladies and gentlemen, I am done. But after I finished writing this piece, I asked one of my colleagues, because I don't use what's it called now? WhatsApp and all of that. I use AI for road maps. I use AI on my search engine, but I don't use GPT or whatever it's called. So I asked him, I said, look, ask ChatGPT to write the same speech for me. It's a 2.5-page thing. I think I can quickly read it in 4 minutes. And essentially, it agrees with all what I have said about investment, about quality of life. I won't read it. But ChatGPT then quotes me in 4 places. In 2010, in 2012, it quotes me in 2014, and then in 2015. And then it quotes Chief Fashola. God bless his soul. So I said to my colleague, I don't remember saying these things. I said, so go and fact check these things for me and let me see. And ChatGPT comes back and says, well, you know, I can make mistakes. I'm not above the law. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.